Hi, and welcome back to Gavin's Sonex B. Well, I've tied my hair up today because I watched the last video and thought, my God, your hair's a mess. And it gets to a certain length and then it goes completely mad. And I think it's actually got to that length, so I might have a bit chopped off it. With summer coming, I usually have it cut a couple of inches off it prior to the summer anyway. But what am I going to get up to today? Well, after successfully joining the two halves of the crankcase together, the next thing in the manual is to put the oil pump on. So I have tipped the engine onto its back and part way through the process of putting the pump in. So I'll show you what's going on. So we're looking at the front of the engine where the propeller's going to go, and the oil pump goes in the front of the engine at the bottom. And when you get the pump out of the box, this is the box that it came in. It's pre-assembled with a couple of studs holding everything together. It had this anodized plate on the front of it, but it also came with its original front plate as well, and I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to use that one or that one. The video and the manual both show the cast fluted, for want of a better description, front on the pump. And I'll probably go with that to start off with and put a message through to Kerry just to find out whether there's a good reason not to use that one, whether that plate that's there is just to hold it together in transit, but then why didn't they use the front one? I don't know. Anyway, I'm sure it'll all become as clear as mud. Anyway, so what have I done? Well, the instructions tell you to strip the thing to bits. Well, I've managed to get it into these bits without really pulling it apart. So we've got the pump body, which has been inserted into the big round hole. It goes around this way, and if you look through the hole there, you might just be able to see that it lines up with the end of the camshaft, and there's a slot in the end of the camshaft which fits into, I've just dropped a bit on the floor, that there, which is the drive. And so what we've got to do is take the gears and give them a coating of lithium grease so that they get a good start in life and can generate some suction to pull the oil around on first startup, and a light coating of oil on the gaskets as well, and then it all needs bolting together. So I'm going to busy away and do that, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so there is the oil pump, or the dual oil pump, installed in its place. So the one that circulates the, or the part of it that circulates the oil around the engine, is actually inside, inserted into the big hole, and then the secondary pump, which is the one for the turbo, is sitting on the front. I've opted to go with the cast looking front plate for the moment. I'm going to send an email, and I'm sure Kerry's had this question asked many times, and the answer should be in the manual really. Is there any difference between using that plate or this one? I've opted for the thicker one on the basis that it won't bend under pressure. It does weigh slightly more, about 30 grams more than this one, but not enough to worry about. So I'll have a look and see what's next, and back in a minute. So what was next is to put the cylinders and the cylinder heads on. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and actually performed the entire procedure on one side of the engine. And the reason I did this was I knew it was going to be difficult, and it was. I thought, rather than make all the mistakes and show you the wrong way to do it, I would basically have a practice on one side, and then I'll know how to do it for the second side. So we'll go ahead and start on the other side in a minute. Issues I ran into were to do with the shims for the bottom of the cylinders. Couldn't make the right thickness up with the shims that were provided, because basically they're one set of shims short of a complete set to do all the combinations that are in the instructions. In order for me to do it absolutely spot on, I would have needed one 90 thou and two 40 thous shims on each cylinder. But I had lots of 60 thou shims and only one set of 40 thou shims, and they come in packs of 4. So what I did was I used 2 sets of 60 thous and a 40 thou, which is 10 thou shy of what it's supposed to be. But if you look at the way that the calculation is done, it's for a range of measurements. We'll do the measurements a bit later on, and it still falls within the tolerances required. So the 10 thou short of shims means that I'm going to have slightly over 7:1 compression ratio, but it is only slightly over. Anyway, that was one. And then also a number of the studs needed cutting, which was a bit of a pain in the arse, because you've got to take it all to bits and then cut the studs and then put it all back together again, and a bit of a pain in the bum. But anyway, we'll go through that. I'm going to cut the studs before putting it together this time. Anyway, I shall get ready and we'll assemble the cylinders and cylinder heads onto the other side of the engine. More in a minute. So the first thing to do is to screw in the 8 studs on each side, and they are different lengths. Short ones go in the center here, and long ones across the bottom, and can't quite remember now, but I think it's a medium one up there and a long one on the left. It's different on both sides because of this recessed captive nut which is inside the block here on this side. Anyway, what I've had to do though is shorten the 2 top ones by 1/2 inch, because they were way too long, and if you don't do that, they interfere with the inlet manifold when you bolt that onto the head a bit later on. And I've also had to reduce these 3 by 10 millimeters to miss the rocker assembly a bit later on. And I've obviously worked this out from doing the other side first. So whereas I cut them in situ, these ones I've pre-cut before we've started. They just screw in. Mine screw in and stop basically at the right place. I think others, you just screw them in until they just protrude the other side. But these ones stopped in roughly the right place anyway. So I've screwed them in, and the next thing we've got to do is have a look at our cylinders. So these are our cylinders with the pistons already installed inside. If we look underneath, we can see the pin that goes through to connect it to the conrod. And previous to this, we've painted them, and then it's a good idea to poke the or take the piston out and just check the rings, the two top rings, compression rings, one at a time by sliding them down inside the barrel and checking that the gap between the ends of the piston ring is between 12 and 22 thou. There's a procedure for doing that in the manual, so that's all been done. We've lightly lubricated the barrels before we put the pistons back in. And so the next thing to do, and also as part of the sort of preparation procedure, you fit one of the barrels with its piston onto the side of the engine and check the amount of shims that you're going to need in order to get the compression ratio right. And basically when I did this to mine, I put the one of the cylinders on, connected up the piston to the conrod, got it to top dead center, and then measured the distance between the top of the piston and the top of the... So the piston was pushed out, and on mine they were pretty much in line with the top of the cylinder. So I had between 10 thou and nothing basically, between all four of them. And so if you look in the manual, there's a chart and it tells you how many shims you need, and mine worked out that I needed 170 thou of shims, which was a 9 and 2 4s, or 90 and 2 40s, let's say. As previously described, I didn't have enough 40s. I only had 4 40s in the kit, and I would have needed 8. So I've been using 2 60s and a 40, which gives me 160 thou, which means I'm going to have slightly over 7 to 1 compression ratio, but I mean it is slightly, might be 7.1 maybe. So that's fine, so that's what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the cylinders up the other way, and we're going to put the shims on. So here is one of them, and I've turned it upside down, and I've pushed the piston out to the point where I can get the pin in and out without any problems. I now need to fit one of the retaining clips so that it'll only go out one way, and the clips look a bit like this. I'll just use a pair of fine nosed pliers to squeeze the two ends together and then slip it in there, and there's a little ridge or a groove that the clip sits in. So I'll do that. I've previously wiped clean all the way around the base of the cylinder, and I'm going to apply a layer of former gasket number 3 around there, and then pop one of the spacer rings on. So that's the first one on, and now I need to apply some more former gasket round here, and then put the next one on top, and then more former gasket, then the next one on top, and then more former gasket, and then slide the whole assembly onto the studs. So there's our cylinder with its 3 spacers and lots of gooey former gasket around it, and now we're going to slide it onto the studs. And first of all, we've got to make sure that the piston is around the right way. Now, the pistons have an arrow on them. You can just see it down there, and the arrow has got to point towards the flywheel. So this one is going on here, so the arrow is pointing towards the flywheel end. So I'm just going to slip it on and get it connected up. And so there's the cylinder and the piston, and I've connected it up to the con rod, and I've put the second retaining clip in on this side, and now all we have to do is slide the cylinder to mate with the crankcase. And so there we are, there's the second one. I've just repeated the process and popped the second one on there, checking that both pistons are around the right way, all the clips are in, and it's looking good. So the next thing to do is to slip the head on, and we've just got to put the head gaskets into the head first. So I'll go and get the head out of its box, and we'll go and do that. Back in a minute. So here's the head. It's upside down at the moment, or on its side, whichever way you like to think of it. So we're looking from the piston side, and you can see the valves, the inlet and the exhaust valves, and you can also see where the 2 spark plugs go in as well. I had to clean it up a bit. There was a little bit of swarf left in there from when they cut the second spark plug holes, so it needs a bit of a blowout, and just clean it up a bit. These are the head gaskets, and they're just a simple copper ring, and what I'm going to do is run some oil around the ring just to lubricate it a little bit and help it stay in place when whilst we put it together. I've cleaned the ends of the cylinders, ready to take it. So that's what I'm going to do next. Pop these in, there are two of them, one in each side, and then lift it onto the studs. So there's our head, which I've just slid onto the end of the studs, and I've got one nut stopping it from falling off, but it's not pushed into place. We've got a big gap there because we've got to install some other bits. There is the super tin, which looks a bit like this, and I have no idea why it's called a super tin. Doesn't look all that super to me, but it is tin. That just clips up underneath a little bit. Let's see if I can do this one-handed. It goes in under there and clips, supposedly clips up like, well, I know it's supposed to clip there, but I can't get it to clip. The last one didn't clip either. So I'll just go away for a couple of minutes and argue with this and see what happens. So there's no way that's going to stay on there on its own. There's nothing to hold it there. I'm not really sure how it's supposed to stay there, but it doesn't want to stay there. So I think mainly the push rod tubes hold it in place once they're installed, and the push rod tubes go from these holes here to the corresponding ones in the head there. To fit them, there are these little rubber donuts which go on the ends, both ends, and they're spring loaded at the ends and get compressed when you tighten the head down. So I'll put all those little bits on there, try and persuade all that to stay up under there, and we'll see what happens. And there is the head installed. I've just torqued it up. It's a two-stage process to basically take the studs up in a special order on the first pass to 7 to 10 pounds-feet, and then a different order for the second pass up to 18 pounds-feet. And there it is done. So I have all 4 cylinders and both heads installed now. And so for the first time, our AeroVee engine is starting to look like a proper engine. And the next stage, I think, is to put the rockers on and install the push rods, which I've not been looking forward to because you have to cut the push rods to length. And those of you who've followed Mark from Weekend Hacks Aviation Journey will know that he went through 3 sets of push rods in total to get it right, and I don't want to do that. I want to try and get it right first time, so we'll have to see what happens. But anyway, that's enough for now. So it's about 9 o'clock in the evening, and time for a little drink and sit down, watch a little bit of telly, and then time for bed. And so I'll upload this video, and I'll let you know what happens the next time. See you later.